On Capitol Hill, senators are responding to the Paul Manafort verdict and Michael Cohen plea deal. Members of both parties said this is not the time to consider impeachment of President Trump, but the allegations are serious.
I think we should let the investigations, let the trials move on forward. I think we need to remind ourselves that this is a day when the President of the United States has essentially been named an unindicted co-conspirator, and this is not a day for speculation.
Does any senator who supported impeaching President Clinton need to think seriously about impeaching President Trump?
Well, not at this point, but I mean, we have to take these matters very seriously. So, you know, people ought to be treated equivalently around here.
At this point, more information needs to come forward. But to have the president's personal counsel suggest that he was directed by the president to commit an act which has led to a plea of guilty in a federal court is a serious allegation.
Tim Phillips is the president of Americans for Prosperity, a political advocacy group backed by the Koch brothers, and he joins me now. Tim, welcome.
Good to see you again.
So let me start by asking you about something that former White House advisor Steve Bannon said, that Republicans should make their midterm strategy about preventing impeachment. Do you agree with that?
No, I think that they're better off focusing on the issues, you know, this economy, how well it's doing. They've done some good things there. And then what they're going to try to do for the American people moving forward. I don't think it makes much sense to go into scaremongering on personal things like that. I think the American people, they want to see which party can get results for them, improve their lives or help improve their lives. That's what they want to see.
I want to ask you more about the economy in a moment, but is the Cohen plea deal and the Manafort verdict, you think, going to change where AFP is putting its resources ahead of the midterms?
No, we focus in states for candidates where we see a champion. Someone who genuinely on the issues that can move this country forward will do the right thing. And then folks who will lead. So we don't really look at the extraneous stuff like this. And we also, and I know you know this, Elaine, but we're not an appendage of any political party. You know, we look at the individual candidates and make decisions based on the issues.
I know you say you're not an appendage of any political party. Nevertheless, there is sort of now this storyline on the Republican side where you have Congressman Chris Collins and Duncan Hunter indicted. So Democrats have said that they intend to make that an issue in the election, this notion of corruption within the Republican Party. Is that of concern at all?
I think Americans look at Washington, D.C. and the Pew Foundation, which has done polling for decades about the trust that Americans have or do not have in institutions like the media or the Congress. Congress is at the lowest level for public trust since Watergate, Elaine, which can give you a sense of just how lacking in trust. And I think that a healthy skepticism is a good thing. So I think, frankly, both parties have problems. They've been scandals on both sides for a long time. That's one reason the American people are skeptical about government in general. So I think, yes, this particular situation can be headwinds for the Republican Party in the fall. But candidly, the American people look at both parties and they don't trust a lot of what they see.
Let's talk about Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh. Speaking on the Senate floor Wednesday, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer called on his colleagues to pause or delay the nomination hearings of Brett Kavanaugh. Let's play some of that sound.
Sure.
President, identified as an unindicted co-conspirator of a federal crime, an accusation made not by a political enemy but by the closest of his own confidants, is on the verge of making a lifetime appointment to the Supreme Court, a court that may someday soon determine the extent of the president's legal jeopardy. In my view, the Senate Judiciary Committee should immediately pause the consideration of the Kavanaugh nomination.
When you hear that, Tim, does that cause you any concern at all?
Not at all. Chuck Schumer is incredibly partisan when it comes to this Supreme Court nomination of Brett Kavanaugh. And he said from the very beginning that he was going to oppose anyone that Donald Trump put up. He actually said that. So it doesn't carry any weight. This is purely partisan bickering. And I'll tell you, Elaine, the American people, when they have a president of either party who picks someone who is sound and solid and credentialed for the Supreme Court, they expect the Senate to act in a deliberate but also speedy fashion. And so Schumer is going to, I believe, lose on this one. There's a lot of public support. I've been on the road a lot with our activists in Florida and Wisconsin and Ohio. They feel like this is a good pick, Brett Kavanaugh. He's well-credentialed, and they expect the Senate to act, and I think they're going to. I think they'll do it within the next month.
Yeah, how much of a priority is Brett Kavanaugh's confirmation for AFP?
For us, it's the top federal priority without any question, because the Supreme Court makes decisions that last for a generation or more when it comes to the rule of law in this country. And we've seen activist judges who too often legislate laws from the bench, and that's not good for this country.
Let me ask you about another issue. At a campaign event Tuesday in West Virginia, the president said European-made cars will face a 25% tax when they're imported to the U.S. And the last time we spoke, you told me that you felt the administration's steel and aluminum tariffs were misguided. I assume you still feel that way, that the policy, the feeling hasn't changed. So. But can you explain what you think some of the consequences for the U.S. economy and the American people will be if, in fact, tariffs continue to be a policy choice for this administration?
We're already seeing the adverse consequences of the president's protectionist policies, the tariffs that you're talking about, Elaine. Already American farmers, especially soybean farmers, are hurting. These are the most productive farmers in the world. And they're having to take subsidies, about $12 billion in taxpayer subsidies, when they don't want them. They want to produce and grow what they do, and then have markets. But because of the president's tariffs, they've seen their foreign markets close off. That's happening across the board. If these car and truck tariffs go into place, it's going to be more of the same. American farmers and businesses will see their own businesses shrivel up as foreign markets are closed off. And then, this is the other hidden cost. American consumers, when they go into a Target or a Walmart or a Dollar General to buy products, they're going to find their dollar doesn't go as far, because a lot of what they're looking at and buying, whether it's fruit or whether it's everyday products they use, are from other countries. And so our American consumers will be hurt. And the folks hurt the most are people on a fixed income. People to whom seeing $1 or $2 or $3 increase in key products, that'll really hurt them. So it's not good for this country. We know that protectionism makes politicians on the left and right feel tough and strong, but they're really being tough on American consumers. So the president's done a lot of good for this economy. We just talked about the Supreme Court nomination, which is a good one. His tax cuts have been good, but this protectionism, these tariffs, they hurt Americans.
As you know, the president has been very public about pushing back against that opposition to tariffs. And earlier this month, the president responded specifically to Charles Koch's criticisms, tweeting, he, quote, now makes the ridiculous statement that what President Trump is doing is unfair to foreign workers. He is correct. America first. I wonder what your sense is of the relationship now with the White House in the last year and a half or so. You talk about, on the one hand, there are situations like the Brett Kavanaugh nomination, with like the tax cuts that certainly you and your organization support. But at the same time, when you talk about a policy that, in your view, has the potential to affect the American economy for years to come, that would seem to be a major gap. Has your relationship changed with this White House? It
has not. What we have found is that we take both sides, both the White House and our network, focus really on an issue-by-issue basis. And so, for example, right now, criminal justice reform. You and I have discussed that in the past. Our network is passionate about that, giving people second chances. It also is good for our country. The White House is with us. We stand together on that. Jared Kushner has worked so hard with our team and with a broad coalition. We're working together, and that has not been impacted by our disagreement on trade. The Kavanaugh nomination, our network has made over 1 million telephone calls and knocked on tens of thousands of doors in 36 states supporting the Kavanaugh nomination. In no way would we ever pull back from those Kavanaugh efforts because we have a disagreement on trade or other areas. And so it's been a working relationship. We don't get caught up in the personalities or the Twitter stuff. We just focus on the issues. And it's been a productive relationship, and I think it's going to continue to be.
Last question for you. What's the biggest issue you think facing Republicans this fall?
I think spending. They have failed to rein in federal spending. They've got one more chance, Elaine. They have the budget bills coming up.
Is anybody paying attention to this notion of spending?
Well, I tell you who is. The Republican and conservative base. They care about that issue. They're looking at it. The president rightly said, after the last omnibus at the end of March, he said, I will never sign another boondoggle like this. We're encouraging him to maintain that position. And already you've got voices, Republicans in the Senate and the House, and this is stunning. They increased spending by $600 billion over the budget caps back in March. They're already saying with this next budget deal, we got to go higher. We got to spend more. I think that's a big moment of truth for them, and it's coming up at the end of September because, the fiscal year for the government starts October 1. They got to have a spending bill in the next month and a half. That's the biggest short-term issue. Kavanaugh is the biggest in the Senate, but the biggest for Republicans writ large is spending.
All right, Tim Phillips, thank you so much, Tim. Really appreciate you stopping by. I could talk to you
Always
all
good to
day.
see you.
Thank you.